se encuentran en el chat. El icono que dice chat en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Gracias.
Okay, next slide. Right. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining the Missing Middle LA Public Informational Webinar. This webinar is an opportunity for you to learn more about the Missing Middle LA program and hear about the proposed ordinances. These ordinances will help create a range of missing middle housing types, including accessory dwelling units, ADUs, duplexes, and small lot homes to help address the growing demand for more attainable and flexible housing choices in all residential zones. By creating opportunities for a wider range of housing options in LA neighborhoods, the program aims to support homeowners, multi-generational families, aging residents, and Angelenos seeking to remain rooted in their communities. The purpose of this webinar will be to introduce and explain the Missing Middle LA ordinances. During the webinar, participants will have the opportunity to learn more about the proposed code amendments and implementation approaches, ask questions and engage directly with planning staff, provide comments and community feedback on the draft ordinances. First, let's do some quick framing, including introductions and some housekeeping. The Missing Middle LA team includes a group of external consultants, us, Office of Office, ACOM, and the Lee Andrews Group. The Missing Middle LA program is jointly led by the City Planning Department's Housing Policy Unit and the Urban Design Studio. This team includes senior city planners Michelle Levy and Matt Glesney, city planners Jenalee Auberfell and Denai Zaire, planning associate Kevin Fulton, and planning assistant Dorothy Kyun. For more information after today's meeting, please email planning.missingmiddlela@lacity.org. Our goals for this session are to update you on our progress, give you an opportunity to provide feedback, and as a few housekeeping reminders, this session will be recorded only for note-taking purposes by Lee Andrews Group. Their staff will be available during the call to support any logistical challenges. We will be summarizing the discussions today to incorporate into future revisions to the ordinances. Please feel free to drop questions into the Q&A. Questions will be answered in the order they have been added. We are not allowing personal note-taking or AI assistance. If you have any questions after the workshop, you can email planning.missingmiddlela@lacity.org. We do want to remind you that any emails sent are subject to future public record requests. Now, on to the exciting part. Today, we are introducing a series of code amendments and ordinances that make up the Missing Middle LA program and that were just released for public review and feedback last week. Missing Middle LA is a citywide initiative focused on expanding neighborhood-scale housing options through targeted zoning code amendments that aim to implement and go beyond recent state housing laws. Today's agenda will cover program background, program components, such as ADUs, SB9, TUD, and urban lot splits, small lot subdivisions, SHIRA, state and local. Also next steps, and finally, a discussion. First, we wanted to briefly reiterate the program background and the program's goals. Despite progress, Los Angeles doesn't offer enough diverse housing types. Homeownership rates in Los Angeles are among the lowest in the nation, particularly for young people. Most new housing is either apartments or large single-family homes. The chart on the right highlights this disparity in the supply of missing middle housing structures, 2 to 20 unit developments. Missing Middle LA addresses part of the housing challenge Los Angeles is facing. It provides an opportunity to fill part of this gap because it is more affordable by design and addresses both housing form and the people it serves. Smaller lots reduce land costs per home. Smaller homes cost less to build and purchase. Together, these factors can expand homeownership opportunities, create more attainable housing options, and support neighborhood scale development. So, how do we bring more missing middle units? Changes to state law, including a slate of ADU laws, SB 9, and the Starter Home Revitalization Act, or SHIRA, help to remove red tape and permit greater housing production. These changes create more opportunities for homeownership and rental alternatives, support a wider range of housing choices, help integrate new housing into existing neighborhoods while supporting walkability and local economic activity, and focus on areas not impacted by recent housing initiatives. Many recent state laws establish a framework for these housing types, but cities still play an important role in implementing them through local ordinances. Importantly, this type of development is not without precedent here in LA. And missing middle housing is ingrained in LA's DNA and serves as the earliest iteration of low rise, mid density apartment housing. These typologies include bungalow courts, fourplexes, and small courtyard apartment buildings. But over time, these typologies at this middle scale became difficult, if not impossible to build. At the same time, the city produces relatively little for sale housing, particularly at smaller, more attainable price points. Missing Middle LA builds on existing city housing initiatives and the mayor's housing directives. It advances specific housing element commitments in these areas, complements other housing efforts at higher scale like CHIP and SB 79, continues the work of the low rise design challenge in small lots, big impacts, and updates local regulations to better align with evolving state housing laws. Overall, Missing Middle LA provides clarity on state law, better design outcomes, and is able to reflect LA's local policy priorities.
Thank you for that background, Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Glesney. I'm with the Department of City Planning's Housing Policy Unit, and I'll be running through the first part of the presentation and the ordinances, the ADU and the SB 9 portions, before my colleague Michelle gets into the small lot components. Just a bit more background before we get into the slides, into the details of what we're proposing in our first draft. And we're very excited to have just released them. The overall strategy for the program is to not just codify and implement state law, but also to leverage and improve upon them in an effort to really get the best from them in our LA specific context. We want to do this in a way that maximizes and harmonizes our housing, design, and livability goals. We want to expand opportunities for homeownership in the form of condoized ADUs, starter homes, and other small lot ownership typologies. And we also want to improve local outcomes through better design, preservation of existing structures and trees, and more walkable neighborhood development. In addition to leveraging and improving upon these state laws, we also see technical assistance and education as an important part of this work program and the code amendments themselves. That's because the use of these particular laws is often initiated by homeowners themselves, whether it's through an ADU in the backyard, a two-unit development, or a lot split. These tools can create new housing opportunities while also helping longtime Angelenos build wealth, accommodate multi-generational families, age in place, or generate rental income. Because these programs can be very complex to navigate, we're also working with some other consultants on a new web-based tool that will allow homeowners to explore what may be possible on their property, understand the different pathways available, and evaluate the feasibility of using these laws before beginning the development process. We also want to highlight that while state housing law allows for local implementation ordinances, such ordinances cannot conflict with state law, cannot physically preclude certain types of protected housing development, and must apply uniformly to the zone. In other words, we can't create requirements that would apply only to the state law types of projects. The California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, has review and enforcement authority over the implementation of these laws and ordinances. Okay, let's start with the update to our city's ADU ordinance. Many of you are likely familiar with ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in the development process. And most of the changes you'll see in the draft ADU ordinance are simply to align the city's ADU ordinance with the current state law. Since 2017, Los Angeles has permitted more than 45,000 ADUs, becoming a leader in the state. Missing Middle LA builds on that success by updating our ordinance to reflect recent changes in state law and creating new opportunities for both rental and homeownership. The proposed ADU ordinance has three primary goals. First, again, it updates Los Angeles's ADU regulations to reflect changes in state law that have occurred since the city's ordinance was adopted in 2019. Second, it implements specific direction from City Council, including creating a pathway for ADUs to be sold as condominiums, which is now an option under state law. We are also proposing to add protections for existing tenants and providing them the same rights to notice, relocation assistance, and the right of first refusal to purchase their unit as for other types of condo conversions. Separately, we've also been asked to expand our fire safety protections in certain Northeast Los Angeles hillside communities and further remove barriers that can make ADU projects more difficult to build. Finally, the ordinance proposes to go beyond state law in several areas, which we'll describe, by establishing a new ADU bonus program to create additional housing opportunities. In addition to updating the ordinance to match state law, we're proposing a few targeted local changes based on several years of our implementation experience with ADUs. These are meant to address common barriers, things like height flexibility, for giving 3 additional feet for state ADUs to allow for more livable units, making it easier to add small junior ADUs or JADUs, providing limited flexibility for ADUs in the front of a main home when the main house is set far back on the lot, and allowing ADUs in existing basements, attics, and mixed-use ground floor spaces more easily. I'll illustrate the last bucket on setbacks in yards on the next slide. But the goal here is not a wholesale rewrite or major increases, but practical fixes that make ADUs easier to create in situations where the housing already makes sense. So this diagram just gives an example of the kind of practical fixes we're proposing. Today, many garages sit within a setback area. If a homeowner wants to convert or rebuild that structure as an ADU, even being off by a few inches, can actually create challenges under the current state law. The proposal would allow a very modest 2 feet expansion to these existing structures, provided it moves away from neighboring properties. It's a small change, but one that we think will have a meaningful difference for many ADU projects. Next, the ADU bonus program is where we are proposing to go beyond state law to really create additional housing opportunities. The program includes several targeted incentives and allowances, such as greater flexibility for converting and adding to existing structures, as shown, allowing multifamily conversion ADUs to round up the number of units, and creating new 4-unit configurations through combinations of ADUs with SB 9 2-unit developments. It also introduces several new bonus ADU opportunities, including something we're calling opportunity ADUs on certain large lots in higher opportunity areas of our city, as well as ADUs on mixed lots that have both a single family and multifamily structure, as well as ground floor ADUs within mixed use buildings. Finally, the program includes an affordable ADU bonus, which we'll discuss on the next slide. The affordable ADU bonus is intended to create a pathway for deed-restricted affordable ADUs in locations where additional housing capacity makes sense, especially near transit and in higher and moderate opportunity areas. The basic idea is that a property could receive one additional market rate ADU for each affordable ADU that is provided, with the number of ADUs scaled to the size of the lot and capped at a total maximum of 6 ADUs or junior ADUs on a large 9,000 square foot lot. The program includes locational limits, so it would not apply in our very high fire zones, our historic districts or HPOZs, as well as our A agricultural zones and our RA residential agricultural zones. On the right is an example of how ADU bonuses might look in order to receive 4 ADUs on a kind of standard 6,000 square foot lot. On the left is what actually somebody could build today already under state law. As you can see, the affordable ADU bonus would provide 1 additional unit if 2 units are provided as affordable housing. The second state bill that this work program includes is called the California Home Act, or the Housing Opportunity for More Efficiency Act, but better known as SB 9. But this bill was also updated in the last year or two to incorporate additional changes through Senate bills 450 and 112. The Home Act, or SB 9, became effective in 2022. It created 2 streamlined housing options, allowing homeowners to build up to 2 homes on a lot or subdivide a lot and create additional homes. The law is intended to expand small-scale housing and homeownership opportunities while maintaining important protections for renters, historic resources, and environmentally sensitive areas. We are not proposing significant changes or additions to the state law. As shown in the table below, however, the changes we are proposing to SB 9 2-unit developments include reduced local requirements such as covered parking and passageway, as well as community benefits to protect trees and historic resources. The diagram shows how these community benefits could work by offering development incentives to preserve trees and historic resources. We are proposing more significant changes to better enable SB 9 urban lot splits, which can only be done by homeowners themselves. However, when interested homeowners realize that they need to give away large portions of their land due to various local and state requirements, many have decided it's not worth it. To address these issues, we're proposing increased flexibility on frontage and access points, as well as lot split proportionality rules, and allowing shared parking on either of the lots. The diagram on the left shows, you'd have to give away almost half of your lot, essentially, and the diagram on the right shows essentially what we'd be proposing.
Thank you, Matt. My name's Michelle Levy, and I lead the Urban Design Studio. It's great to be here with you this afternoon, and I want to thank you all once more for being with us today. I'm going to be covering changes to our existing local small lot subdivisions ordinance and the implementation of the state's recently adopted Starter Home Revitalization Act, or SHURA, as we've been referring to it. The Starter Home Revitalization Act builds on the small lot subdivision concept that we really pioneered here in Los Angeles in 2005. The law allows projects with up to 10 homes to move through a streamlined approval process and opens the door to housing types like townhomes, cottage courts, and bungalow courts that have historically been difficult to build. Originally, these types of small lots were limited to multifamily areas, but the law was recently expanded to allow eligible projects in certain single-family neighborhoods as well. In addition to streamlining approvals, SHURA establishes a common set of development standards that make smaller homeownership projects more feasible. It allows smaller lots. It allows guaranteed baseline development rights, and it creates a more predictable process while still maintaining environmental, historic resource, and anti-displacement protections. The Starter Home Revitalization Act went into effect on July 1st, 2025. And we've seen some projects already utilize this state law within the city. The bill was modeled on our small lot ordinance and promotes the development of these small lot projects in all residential zones. The state law basically allows 10 homes on newly created lots. It applies in both multifamily and now expands to single family areas. And it includes several key features. It allows minimum lot sizes as small as 600 square feet in multifamily and 1,200 square feet in single family zones. It allows a floor area ratio of 1-to-1, guaranteed density, and the flexibility to do uncovered parking. But it does have some important limitations. It excludes environmentally sensitive areas, and it includes anti-displacement tenant protections. So working within this framework, our mandate is to implement the state law here in Los Angeles. And to better understand the basic state law structure, the law is organized in the following way. First, it establishes baseline starter home subdivision eligibility and review standards. And this includes the lot considerations. For example, no vacant lots are permitted. It has to be outside of fire zones and sensitive areas. And then the law prescribes starter home housing development standards for the housing development itself. Now, in our proposed ordinance, we have taken this a step further to include starter home community benefits, which is a concept that will be available to all projects, and a starter home bonus program, which provides additional incentives through a city door meant to encourage development that is more contextual and sensitive to existing conditions. I'll be covering this in more detail, but this last point is an opportunity to exert some level of design control over projects by providing bonuses in exchange for making city-specific and community beneficial concessions. And it really mirrors the same terminology of the city ADU bonus program that Matt just went over, that goes further than the state ADU laws, so similar structure. Now, diving into our proposed starter home program, which is the direct implementation of the state law. The program incorporates the state law provisions as a type of small lot subdivision of up to 10 units. It also modifies local provisions that we've heard from the development community. We've learned have created unnecessary barriers to creating this type of desirable housing. So one is allowing pedestrian access walkways as the sole access. This is in cases where parking is not needed or required. Rather than requiring a driveway, we're allowing access through pedestrian walkway. We're removing the passageway, the 10-foot passageway requirement between buildings, allowing a shared parking area like a parking court and off-site parking within 750 feet. We're addressing some of the R1 variation zone standards that are incompatible. We're addressing some hillside, yard, and lot coverage provisions that have already been waived in the small lot subdivision ordinance. We're proposing to exempt areas beneath projections, and this is like when you have a cantilevered area, the area beneath that is now counted as floor area, so we're proposing to exempt those areas that are not actually enclosed. And we want to align with the city's early start building permit provisions to allow builders to begin some construction activities while their subdivision process is pending. The Starter Home program also encourages community benefits in exchange for development benefits. In drafting the ordinance and considering the qualities that make lots more livable, we identified 4 key benefits in exchange for modest development potential. These include significant tree preservation of surveyed historic resources identified in Survey LA, the city's largest historic resources survey, the creation of bungalow courts, and an incentive for placing parking below ground. And you can see on the table the proposed trade-off or the resultant incentive that we're proposing for each of these, how it corresponds. And this is really in order to promote these specific concessions, we're proposing to allow some increased floor area ratio, setback reductions, parking reductions, and increased height to make up for the preservation that's taking place. Now, the Starter Home Bonus Program, the alternative pathway, or as we've referred to it, the city door, requires developers to meet additional design standards in exchange for additional development potential. The bonus program would allow for more concessions in exchange for following what will be an updated set of small lot design standards. Projects using this local city alternative will be eligible for a JADU or JADU on each of the parcel, reduced lot sizes, increased density, increased height, reduced parking by 50%, increased floor area, to 1.25 to 1 instead of 1 to 1 allowed by the state law, and an alignment of front yard setbacks with existing development patterns, so contextual front yard setbacks. The small lot map standards, which are used today for small lot subdivisions under the authority of the Subdivision Map Act and the advisory agency, will be expanded to apply to starter home bonus projects. The standards will be updated to address common vehicle access lanes or driveways that are as small as 8 feet in width to allow for smaller driveways with a smaller paving footprint on the lot, allow for the pedestrian pathway in lieu of a driveway that I mentioned earlier. It would reduce required automobile guest parking, so it would cut the current requirement in half to 0.125 spaces per unit. It would allow for compact stalls. It's not a requirement, but it would enable the provision of compact stalls instead of requiring one standard stall. It would require alley access where alleys meet a 20-foot minimum width. And it would regulate the placement of electrical, mechanical mounted equipment away from public view. Now, later this summer, we'll be releasing a companion to the small lot design standards to tighten up the standards to be more objective and more effective to advance both gentle density and design quality. So we're taking our current small lot design standards and updating them to apply to the starter home bonus projects, in addition to small lot ordinance projects. So in exchange for greater development potential, starter home bonus projects through the city door will need to satisfy the new design standards and the small lot map standards. The small lot ordinance will also be updated with some minor amendments, including some policy changes to reflect that in many circumstances, parking and therefore driveway access can no longer be required, as well as to codify an advisory agency policy to follow the tenant protections in the condo conversion code in cases of conversion of existing rental housing to for sale housing under the ordinance. In addition, the updates aim to codify standards and procedures and the relationship of small lot projects to the starter home program. Projects can use both the small lot subdivision and SHURA provisions if they meet the requirements of each law.
Thanks, Michelle. So now we are going to be talking about next steps. We've walked through an initial draft of the ordinance and its components on ADUs, SB 9, and the starter home program. We are requesting public comments on the ordinances by July 31st, 2026, this year. Between now and the end of July, we will also be holding office hours, which will be announced next week. Please look out for an email from LA City Planning announcing those dates and times if you're interested in meeting with us directly. Longer term, in September, we will be releasing a second public draft for the public hearing, which will incorporate community feedback. And in October, we are tentatively targeting a city planning commission followed by city council adoption. In the meantime, if you have any questions or additional feedback, please contact planning.missingmiddlela@lacity.org or reach out to the staff on this call. As a reminder, emails sent to the city may be subject to public records requests. We've covered a lot of information today, and now we'd like to open up the conversation we're going to transition into a moderated discussion and spend the rest of our time answering your questions. Many of you have already submitted some really great questions through the Q&A. Thank you. And please continue to add them as they come to your mind. I'll read each question aloud and then invite team members of the city planning team to respond. We'll work through as many questions as we can get to in the time we have remaining today. So first, Ron has a question. Would condominiums built with MIIP programs be made available for sale? And that includes non-affordable unit assigned. So that it can help lower the cost of ownership. If so, does missing middle differ? Matt, that would be great if you could tackle this one.
Sure. Yeah, Ron, I think you're referencing our new mixed income incentive program, which was I think been out for about a year, and that is generally at a higher scale of development than what we're talking about today, um, in terms of the number of units and the height and all that. Typically, apartment buildings are using it, although condos can use our mixed income program. I'll say that we typically see when folks build condos using the mixed income program or other incentive-based programs, that often those affordable units that are required are actually not able to be sold to lower income individuals and actually are often rented. So you may have a building with market rate condos for sale and affordable rentals. There are many reasons for that and challenges for that, but that's an important distinction is just the scale of housing we're talking about here, and the fact that this program really focuses on home ownership and small lots, versus, I think you're looking at a higher scale and generally more condominiums through the mixed income program. This program doesn't have a dedicated affordability in it, except for, we mentioned the ADU bonus program. We're trying to get some affordable ADUs through that, but generally otherwise, these would hopefully be, again, what we use the term affordable by design, or more naturally affordable, because generally, again, as we mentioned, these are on smaller lots. They're generally smaller homes, and those combinations can generally be more attainable than your typical large home on a large normal sized lot. So this is more focused on home ownership and maybe looking at creating more natural affordability compared to our mixed income program. So I hope that gets at what you're asking for, Ron. If we didn't nail it, feel free to ask a follow-up. Thanks.
And I'm going to bop around a little bit. This one's for you, Michelle. How are you defining what a significant tree is?
Yeah, so we're going off of the definition that was included in the landscape and site design ordinance, which has not yet been adopted by City Council, but is on its way. We're hoping by this fall it will become final ordinance. And that defines a significant tree as a tree with 12-inch diameter trunk at breast height. And that's kind of the standard practice for arborists. So it's really regardless of the tree species, it refers to the maturity of the tree as it relates to the trunk size.
Thank you, Michelle. Back to Matt. Are you proposing an attic ADU or an ADU in another part of the primary dwelling that could be sold as a condo?
Yeah. Essentially, any type of ADU that's created on a property would be eligible to be sold as a separate condo. It actually creates two condos, right? Your original home would be the other part of the condo map. And then the ADU would be a separate unit for sale. And so, that can be a conversion of an existing portion of your home, including an attic. It can be detached. And the attic, I'll just say on the attic, you may have heard me mention that that's actually a bit of a challenge today with ADUs, and that's something we're addressing separately aside from the for sale. Is just often that requires a two-step solution where you have to permit your space as something other than an ADU first, get that inspected, get that permitted, and then go for a second step to convert that to an ADU. And that's one of the things we're doing in this ordinance, is saying that those spaces could actually be converted straight to an ADU through a one step. So I wanted to mention that as well. Thank you.
Yes, and Stephen, who asked this question, has a follow-up, which is, will the new rules allow a detached ADU to be larger than the primary original home on the lot? Matt, this is you again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm exactly sure that the question seems to imply that detached ADUs have a limit that they can't be larger than the primary home. I don't believe that's the case. There is size limits. There's the size limit of 1,200 square feet for a local detached ADU. And then there's state ADUs, which are capped at 800 square feet. So perhaps that's what was meant. We're not proposing to change those size limits for detached ADUs. That those would remain. But if folks have comments on that, we'd love to hear them. But we are not planning on changing the size limits for the detached ADUs.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Michelle, this is from Benjamin. He is wondering where the specification of 20-foot alleys come from.
Yeah, so Benjamin, that is a standard width that is in our mobility plan for alleys. So many of our alleys are not developed to a standard 20-foot width, but that is the prescribed width in our long-range plan.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Let's see. Celeste has a great question, which is how many ADUs will be allowed on lots with both single family and multifamily uses under the new ADU bonus options? Matt, could you help us out with that?
Yeah. Hi, Celeste. A bit wonky. This is referring to some state ADU types. And for folks who may be familiar, there are state ADUs that you can build on single family properties. And that means not the zoning, that means what you actually have on the lot. So there's certain types that are paired with when you have a single family dwelling on a lot. Then there are other types of state ADUs that are allowed when you have multifamily buildings on a lot. And the question has come up, well, what if you have both? And interestingly, the state HCD has provided guidance that says you kind of have to pick your lane. You either go for the multifamily ones, you can do that, or the single family, but you can't sort of mix and match and combine those. So what we're proposing is not a full ability to mix and match and combine. In fact, I think we looked at that, and that you can get up to 9 units. I think really, if you max that out on one property, we not proposing that. But what we are proposing is saying if you have that unique combination of a single family and a multifamily, we're going to give you one extra ADU than you would normally be allowed. So you would just get plus one in terms of what you would normally be allowed today when you have that arrangement, but not the full 9. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. This one is also for you, from G. Smith, and this is about construction costs for ADUs. They ask, construction costs for ADUs can range from 400 to 600K when accounting for permits, architecture services, and utility connections. How can the city and state better address the high cost of ADU construction?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we hear you on the costly nature of even these small projects. And while our work program is mostly focused on what is in our ability to control here in city planning in terms of zoning and land use policies and streamlining policies, we know that's only part of the problem. But I think many of the proposals that you heard about today are meant to make things less costly. To again, avoid a two-step process, for example, and provide other efficiencies that we've seen over the years. So we know that's not going to bring down the cost of every ADU, but we think it will bring down the cost for many types of ADUs. Um, we are actually working on a report back, the city council, looking at other agencies in the city and what else the city can do. So I will point to that future report of looking at how can we just better look at our permitting processes with our Department of Building and Safety, or the inspection processes, or really something that I think the report's going to focus in on. And anybody who's built an ADU in LA would know there's something called clearances that happens once you think you're at the finish line with your building permit, but then they say go talk to 7 different agencies or 5 different agencies and get clearances, and that may add significant cost and time and often additional work that adds costs. So we are looking at that and working with the city council and other agencies to see what else we can do as a city family. But um, the cost of labor, the cost of construction, the cost of materials, we only have limited control over. I think part of I think what makes ADUs really successful, however, is that it's sort of standardized, and you are beginning to see a real industry grow up around this, where efficiencies are being found every day, and the more rules are standardized across jurisdictions, that helps bring down costs over time. But you know, um, yeah, I know. One of the things we're trying to do is again the affordable ADUs, because we'd love to see some affordable ADUs, and so we're using the land use tools at our disposal for that. Um, but I think some other things might take interventions beyond what the city planning department can do. But that's a great question. Thanks.
This question is for Michelle. Will starter home requirements for these projects in HPOZs require compliance with the HPOZ plan design standards for new construction?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad that question was brought up. Actually, just today, our Department Office of Historic Resources released objective design standards for infill multifamily projects in historic districts. And one of our staff will include a link here to those standards, and projects will be required to follow specific standards within HPOZs.
Perfect. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle, we have another question. Have other departments and bureaus reviewed the standards, such as keeping electrical equipment away from public view, given the DWP requirements are typically along the street frontage?
Yeah, great question. That's something that we're going to have to engage in, like as a next step after this phase. We're going to be discussing all of the standards with our sister city departments. DWP is a big one. Oftentimes planning, you know, does not have control over the placement of utilities, but that's certainly something that we're going to be pushing for with DWP. And my understanding is that these smaller projects at this scale are not requiring transformers like some of the larger projects that we've seen. So they're at a smaller scale, and they're not requiring very large equipment like we sometimes see in multifamily projects.
Perfect. Michelle, this seems to relate to the mobility plan. This question is, what proportion of the existing alleys are 20 feet?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer. That's something we can certainly follow up and try to get more information on. But the idea is that we want to encourage, and the reason that we, just to provide some context, I didn't really cover this in the slide, but the idea is that we want to try to discourage ingress and egress from certainly from arterials, but even our local streets when there's an alley present. It's a really good opportunity to move some of the vehicular traffic off of the street, to reduce the need for curb cuts, to give that space back to the public for curbside parking, um, and street trees. So we think that's an important change, and we'd love to hear feedback on that provision and all of the provisions that we're proposing today.
Matt, this is relative to, let's see who. This is Henry asks, when can ADUs be sold as condos under AB 1033?
Yeah, thanks, Henry. It would be able to be sold once the law is in effect and adopted by City Council. And so Elizabeth gave a little bit of the background, but we think that might be as soon as the end of the year if things go well. We don't control the City Council calendar when it gets in front of them to be able to give a firm date. But we are planning to get transmitted and through our City Planning Commission by the end of the year. And so it could be as soon as early next year that we would have an effective ordinance, and that would become legal. So yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Michelle, we have a question here about if it's possible to add some examples to our presentation of an ordinary residential lot with all the subdivisions incorporated.
Yeah, we actually just released, a great document. It's called the Homeowner's Guide to Missing Middle Housing. And in that document, we kind of walk through a lot of what we talked about tonight. It's available on our project webpage. We can share the link here as well. Encourage everyone who's here and obviously interested in this topic to take a look. And in there, we have several examples of how the state laws would apply today. So we have those examples of what small lots could look like on ordinary single-family lots. We actually surveyed 13 different lots around the city and used real-life examples of true lots that exist in several different neighborhoods. So I invite you all to take a look at the Homeowner's Guide. I see that's been placed in the chat.
As well, potentially not a follow-up, but Michelle, does the city council have final say on this project, and when will that vote happen?
Yeah, great question. So yes, these are all code amendments that we're proposing. So they would have to go through a legislative process. We walked through our next steps. We're aiming to take this through the public hearing and revision of the ordinance process and take it to our city planning commission. From there, the ordinance would travel to the city council for their ultimate decision. And that would happen over the course of the next several months after the City Planning Commission acts. So first it goes to City Planning Commission, and then City Council has the final say.
Great, thank you. We have another very brass tacks question, which is great, which is what is the average price of one of these homes? Matt?
Yeah, well, in some ways we can't know for sure because some of this is not allowed yet, right? We don't have affordable ADUs yet to know quite what they would be, but we expect that they would be less, than a typical single family home in the neighborhood. It's all relative, but it's going to be selling at I would think, a discount to a larger home on a regular sized lot. Same with small lots. We have been doing small lot subdivisions in the city for about 20 years, so we do have some experience there, but they're a little different than the state law that we're talking about today. So it's hard to know for sure. But again, when we've looked at it, they do seem to sell, again, for a bit less than typical homes in the neighborhood of the same size, for example. Again, because they're on a smaller lot, you would expect them, they don't have maybe all the amenities, and that's a pro and a con. That is part of what makes them more attainable for folks who can't afford the typical Los Angeles home on a regular size lot. Is just become unattainable for so many Angelinos at about $1 million, and yeah, we're hoping that these come in at a price point below that. But some of this is still a little bit to be determined as these new laws roll out.
As a bit unrelated, for SLS and Shira, Matt, can this person asks, can I use existing small apartments?
Not sure I understand the question. Small lots, SLS and Shura, small lots and the Starter Home Act, both are typically what's technically called fee simple subdivisions. So you own your land and you own the home. You're part of a homeowners association, but your home is technically separated from your neighbors, and that's a separate ownership and a separate lot. I don't know if anybody could help me out with the question about, can I use existing small apartments? Is that talking maybe about redeveloping a lot that may have small apartments on it today into a small lot or a starter home project? I'm just gonna run with that assumption for a second. That because that is a really important question, because you're not allowed to use the Starter Home Act, the Shura, the state law, unless the site is either vacant or abandoned and uninhabitable, and it can't have had any tenants in it in the last, I think, 5 years. So that's really an anti-displacement thing. So typically, if you have a lot with a small apartment today, it's likely going to have renters in it and likely not going to be eligible for at least 5 years. Why that's trying to discourage the redevelopment of those kind of lots. So there is there is a workaround. However, in fact, this was a change to the state law made just last year through AB 130 that said you can have something called a remainder parcel. What is that? That means essentially you can carve out an existing building, like an existing small apartment building you may have on your lot, carve that out as a remainder parcel, and then leave it alone. Don't demolish it, preserve it. And then you're allowed to actually do your small lot project, behind that typically. Whereas again, normally that would just not be permitted. If you preserve it and sort of don't touch it and call it a remainder parcel, the state has now opened up that as an ability to redevelop your site.
Thanks, Matt. Yes. So this one is for Michelle. Has the city done any research on financial feasibility in relationship to community benefits, affordability requirements, and additional design guidelines? Financial feasibility, including the ability to obtain investment and financing, is this person notes is very important.
Yeah, it's a good and important question. We have not done financial feasibility modeling specifically on the design standards as they relate to these projects. However, we think that the development bonuses that are available in exchange for providing good design will help to harmonize and balance out any additional design related expenses. So that's why we've created a bonus, because we know that, to do good design and thoughtful design requires careful site planning, consideration of, access. And it really does go beyond kind of the minimum that the state law requires. And that's why we've created this bonus pathway to open up some, modest incentives in exchange for high quality design.
Thank you, Michelle.
I might just add on to that because it's an important question. First of all, we'd love to hear feedback from you about the current design standards that we apply on small lots and whether those add cost, because what we're actually planning to doing when we talk about putting in design controls on these Shura bonus projects, just like we do today for our small lot subdivision projects, um, we're actually, we're also giving you a bonus um, to get in to use those that then triggers that requirement to follow those standards. So we did try to calibrate, what's the right level of development bonus, and we're giving roughly around 20% more density, pretty minimal height increases and things like that. But we are allowing you more development rights, and we're hoping that that offsets the additional, um, what could be a cost burden. But I think from our initial conversations, if you look at our existing guidelines, our design standards that we're talking about here, that again we've been applying these to small lot subdivision projects for a long time. Generally, I haven't heard feedback that they add tremendous levels of cost. They may add some cost, some architectural fees, and good design, but not significant. Not these aren't really limiting you in terms of your square footage and things like that, or making you create really unique designs that are going to break the bank. So, I think hopefully those we've hit the right mark. And if folks think that there's a particular regulation that is going to make it infeasible, we'd love to hear about it. But we haven't heard that yet. So I just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, let's see. Matt, can you speak to ED1 or AHSO and how Missing Middle LA will engage with that?
Sure. So for folks who may not know all the acronyms, we're talking about the Mayor Bass's Executive Directive 1, which on her first day of office streamlined the creation of 100% affordable housing. And the AHSO, the Affordable Housing Streamlining Ordinances, was actually recently adopted to sort of codify that kind of streamlining. So it looks a lot like the mayor's executive directive, but makes it sort of law in our code for the future. So again, both of those provisions really focus on 100% affordable housing. It's typically rental housing. It's typically, above the scale we're talking about today in terms of units and height and floor area and all those things. So I really see this as sort of a different typology than those typologies. And, I think a big difference is that these laws are largely allowed to be used most areas of the city, including 72% of our land, which is single family land. And generally those areas are not eligible. The majority of our areas are not eligible for the affordable housing incentives that you mentioned, ED1 and the Affordable Housing Streamlining Ordinance. So different scales, different sort of locations where we think they're utilized. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Also, what about vacant lots? You kind of touched upon this in the earlier question about using existing dwellings. What about a vacant lot, which you did touch on a little bit, but this is a separate question for Missing Middle. Are vacant lots eligible? Matt.
Yeah, vacant lots are in fact, they're not just eligible. That's the requirement in the Shura, in the Starter Home Revitalization Act that we keep talking about here, the small lots up to 10 units. The law requires that the lot actually be vacant or a home that's abandoned and uninhabitable. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to think about exactly what that means and what are some criteria for that. And we've laid that out in our implementation memo, which we have for the current state law. And we describe what conditions may make a property considered to be abandoned or uninhabitable. So it's generally what you think it. It's not a home that's been in use recently. It's not a home. It's certainly not a home that's being rented or occupied at the moment. but it does allow you to either demolish a home ahead of time and then it is vacant, or provide evidence to the city that the home that is there is abandoned or uninhabitable. I don't know if it's helpful to maybe share that memo in the chat, where we and point to where we lay out the criteria that's in the law. There is that other, again, but if it's not vacant, then again, there's that remainder parcel little mention that we talked about earlier, that you can sort of carve that out from your project if it's not vacant. Yeah.
Perfect. Michelle, this is in your court. How will the missing middle impact city resources? Will increasing our housing capacity make it more difficult for residents to have access to city resources during emergencies?
This is actually a housing element question, because we prepared a housing element to prepare for all of the housing that we need to provide. So Matt, please feel free to jump in since you're the expert on housing element. But the infrastructure needs have been analyzed through the housing element EIR. So this is not anticipated to add additional demand beyond what the housing element had analyzed and anticipated.
Perfect. Matt, SB 9 states that 2-unit developments shall be permitted in the A, RA, RE, RS, R1, RU, RZ, and RW1 zones, but the fact sheet says R2 and RD. Can you explain this?
I'm not sure I can. That may have been a typo. Thanks for pointing that out. And no, the SB9 is really only in single family zones. So that may have been a typo. But thanks for bringing it to our attention, and we'll make sure we correct that. Thank you.
Perfect. Matt, for ADUs that will be converted to condos, will there be a streamlined final map process?
Yeah, great question. Because while we're going to allow for the sale as a condo of ADUs pursuant to state law, it's not clear that they're really streamlined, that the state has sort of streamlined that particular condo which is essentially a condominium subdivision process. And so that's something we really are going to focus on, actually. I think in our round 2, it's something I'm very interested in looking at, is like, what can we do to say that this, a sale of an ADU is a lot different than a regular, 400 unit subdivision in the valley. And we should not necessarily be treating these things the same procedurally. These are going to be, homeowners going through it for the first time. And so I really do want to look at how we can kind of right size the requirements for this particular type of subdivision that we think is going to be different than a lot of other types. I mentioned briefly, but one thing we have already done in the condo conversion section of our ordinance is specify that these condo subdivisions would not be subject to things like dedications of land to the city, offsite improvements, things that are actually fairly typical for most kinds of subdivisions, which makes sense. Again, when you're talking about a large subdivision of land, you want to make sure there's infrastructure and that the city has the right kind of streets and sidewalks. But given the scale of this, the proportionality of this, I don't think we really can legally, and we are proposing just to make that clear right off the bat that those requirements would not be applied. But I think we are very interested in looking more closely at this. There is some interesting provisions of the Subdivision Map Act that we're still exploring that may give us a tool to create a more streamlined process. And so we are looking at this as an area to make continued progress on. We're looking what other cities have done. Some other cities are ahead of us, like I think San Jose, and I'm blanking on some, but now San Diego. So we're talking to them to see, how their experience has been and how we can kind of make this as seamless as possible. Because again, particularly, for these are oftentimes maybe a homeowner, and they may not have the ability or the wherewithal or really need to go through these sort of sometimes very intense processes that a subdivision or a condo may entail. So great question, and I think more to come on that. Thanks.
Perfect. And again, Matt, I'm fielding this one to you. Can a small lot project include multiple ADUs before the final map is approved and the subdivision is completed?
Small lot subdivisions, which is what we've had in our code for 20 years, and we're just proposing very minor technical updates there, can have ADUs. They actually could have 2 or 3 units even that aren't ADUs if the zoning allows for it. But ADUs are allowed in typical small lots today. Now, starter homes or Shura projects, which again are very similar to small lots, except they're the state variety of it, limited to 10 units, lots of other rules. That law actually says that cities, it's your choice whether to allow ADUs or not as part of your approvals of these Shura subdivisions. And so some folks may know that we have a bifurcated policy today where we are saying junior ADUs are allowed in single family zones. They're much smaller, capped at 500 square feet, whereas full-on ADUs would be allowed in our multifamily zones. What we are proposing, and I'm glad this was raised because we didn't have time to touch on it, but what we're proposing is a kind of, again, a bit of a bifurcated approach to say that JADUs would be allowed everywhere for every type of project. But if you want a full ADU, we're going to ask you to come through our city door, and we're going to then have those the design standard requirements and things like that. So I hope that helps. Yes, this is a very interesting policy, and we'd love to hear feedback from folks, because on the one hand, obviously, we know that allowing an ADU to be combined with a starter home is helpful for the financial feasibility to get the things built. It's helpful for the homeowner who's buying that home, who now has a ADU that they could rent and help their mortgage out. That's frankly how I became a homeowner, is having a second unit. And I know some of our colleagues as well. So we think that's great for home ownership. On the other hand, we've heard concerns that is adding, more than you need to, or that's adding more units than folks are comfortable with. So I expect that issue to be one that's debated throughout the adoption, and we'd love to hear what you guys think about finding that right balance. We kind of bifurcated it, like I mentioned, to try to achieve that right balance. But yeah, we'd love to hear what everyone thinks.
Michelle, this one is in your court. Someone put forward a comment that there's an ADU in their neighborhood, and it looks as though this ADU is larger than the primary residence. And there was some trees removed, some parking removed, and they're wondering how that aligns with a lot of what we're talking about today around ADUs as helping to preserve the scale and the character of housing in residential neighborhoods.
Yeah. I mean, without knowing the particulars of the existing house size compared to the ADU, I couldn't really answer that question of the relationship and scale or size between the two. But just in terms of the tree issue, I've seen some questions come in just to kind of explain what we have today on the books is only a protected tree ordinance that protects 4 tree species. And if even with a large canopy tree today, that tree, unless it's an official protected tree species, it will not be subject to city review. So people can remove trees to build additions to their homes, ADUs, and so forth. But with our program, what we're proposing is an incentive which doesn't exist today to protect trees in place by allowing people a little bit more floor area to make up for any area in the building that needs to be notched out to accommodate the tree and its protected root zone, because it's not just the tree trunk, it's also the roots beneath the tree that need to be protected. So, to really do that, it requires thoughtful design, stepping back the building, and that may conflict with required setbacks. So we're giving some grace for projects that are preserving those significant trees, which are not officially protected today, by allowing those projects to make up their floor area and potentially get some relief from setbacks as well.
I'll just add about the ADU size question. There are limits. I think I mentioned earlier, it's not there. There's not a limit that says it has to be smaller than the primary dwelling. So I am not disagreeing that what you saw may in fact be correct. But there are limits on the size. So that 1,200 square feet is the cap for a detached ADU. And again, if you're doing a state ADU, it's 800 square feet. But there are some caps to sort of prevent a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot home. These are really meant to be accessory and meant to be relatively smaller by design, but still allow for families to live in them, so not be too small. We want ADUs to be housing for all Angelenos as well. So that is, I'll say it, that is something some cities can put greater limits on sizes. And if you think we should do that, we want to hear from you. But we think the current state law kind of strikes the right balance of at 1,200 and 800 square feet. But we'd love to hear from you if you don't think so. Yeah, thanks.
This is a nice counterbalance. See here, Andrew notes that many historic bungalow courts and garden apartments in Los Angeles feature shared driveways that also functioned as pedestrian-friendly common spaces. In contrast, more recent small lot subdivisions often appear more car-oriented, dense, heavily hardscaped. Are there any changes being proposed to encourage more pedestrian-friendly site design and shared open space within the future small lot developments? Michelle, if you could field this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. Great point. And we talked about this in our presentation, how we're really trying to bring back the bungalow court or courtyard style development that was so prevalent in the early part of the 20th century in Los Angeles. A couple of things that we're including in this ordinance package. As I mentioned, we are narrowing driveway widths to 8-foot minimum, so that will certainly help. Then you have one of the reasons why we have overly large paved areas is in part because car parking is driving backup distances than on sites that are required to get the cars in and out of the development. And so by allowing for compact spaces, you're also effectively reducing the backup distance that's required. And even 2 or 3 feet on each side can really give a lot of space back to landscaping. It can go back into the housing development. It can be space for porches and porticos and more interesting architectural features. So that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to find areas where right now parking and vehicular access is dominating the development, and how to kind of bring it back to a more pedestrian oriented development. Now, one thing that's changed significantly since the small lot ordinance and small lot design standards were adopted is that we have AB 2097 and many state laws that require zero parking. And some developers are opting to maybe not do zero parking, maybe it's 1 space per unit. That again is going to create less of a demand for paved areas or smaller areas for driveways. And then we've also included the ability to completely get rid of the driveway and have a pedestrian passageway if no parking needs to be provided.
Mhm.
So hopefully that's a start. And if you have other, if the, you know, if folks have other ideas, we're very open to new thoughts.
This next question is relative to SB 9. And if that project does not involve an urban lot split, are two detached ADUs treated the same as multifamily ADUs for purposes of determining maximum unit size? If so, is there effectively no size limit on those ADUs beyond the applicable development standards? This is for you, Matt, and we might have to kind of parse through this a little bit, and I can read it again if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, that is.
You want me to read it again?
Well, I'm looking at it. I'm going
Okay,
to try my
great.
best here. Um, so we're talking about a SB9 project that's not a lot split. So we're talking about what's called a two-unit development, where you can have either a duplex, attached duplex, or you can have two detached. But then the question seems to be about asking what kind of ADUs would be able to be paired with that. This is where I'm a little confused. Because what I thought this was asking is, if you were to build a duplex, an SB9 two-unit development attached duplex, that is considered a multifamily building at that point. It's a two-unit building. And then that means that now you can build multifamily type ADUs. I mentioned earlier there's single family ADUs on single family and multifamily. And the multifamily rules allow you to sort of match what is there. So if you have two units in front, you can generally build two ADUs in back. They can be attached or detached from each other. And the size of those is generally regulated by height and setbacks. So yeah, I hope I answered your question somewhere in there, but let's see here. Is there effectively no size limit on those ADUs? Yeah, that may be what you're referring to there. Is if again you're considered these multifamily ADUs, you're building behind a multifamily building. It is true that those particular state ADU types are not regulated by square footage, like I mentioned, a regular detached ADU would be. They are regulated by basically height and setback in your space that you have behind your building. So they can't generally be higher than it's either 16, 18, or 20 feet. It depends on whether you're near transit or near roof. It's a bit convoluted. This is where we're giving you 3 extra feet on top of that. But it's true that there's not a size cap on those particular types. So anyway, I hope I answered that. If not, please feel free to follow up, and we'll do our best. Thanks.
Great. A bit of a more straightforward question could be, and this is for you as well, Matt, can a garage conversion or accessory dwelling unit, ADU, be converted into a condominium if the property does not have alley access?
Yeah. I think there would not be any additional restrictions placed on the conversion of whether it's a garage to an ADU and then is now sold under the new allowance. If you're able to turn that garage into an ADU, there's no alley requirements, and then the sale of it would not trigger any additional alley requirements that I'm aware of. Michelle, you may know more than me about what may kick in terms of alley improvements and things, but I generally think ADUs would be exempt from any kind of those requirements that may apply to like bigger projects. But yeah, ADUs generally don't. Yeah,
that's correct.
Perfect. And will a JADU be permitted in the structure of a detached ADU rather than the primary dwelling?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just as background, junior ADUs, JADUs are actually only allowed. They're actually kind of unique. They're only actually allowed sort of within a single family home. They can't be part of a multifamily building, and they can't be attached to your garage, and they can't be attached they can't just be part of an ADU. They need to actually be part of what we call the primary dwelling, or like the single family home that sort of predated the ADU, or is there along with the ADU. So yeah, it's that's an idea. It sounds like an idea, and I think that we should put that to think about that. I don't. There may be some legal constraints there as well. I need to think about, but just the way JADUs are structured in the state law. But I think we are looking for flexibility, and perhaps that there's something to that. So if you think that's a good idea, make sure you write us at our Missing Middle LA email and tell us what you think and why you think that's a good idea.
Perfect. This is a little bit of a tougher question. What prevents developers from charging market rate prices for naturally affordable housing types, Matt?
Nothing. They are typically they're market rate. They're subject to the rental market in Los Angeles, and I think what we can have some assurance about is that they're going to be generally more attainable than many other housing options that already exist in a single family neighborhood. They're going to be just by their nature, they're going to be cheaper than typical very expensive apartment buildings and condo buildings. But no, they're basically going to be priced, to be competitive in the market. And so if the market is $1 million for a home, we're hoping that we think they're going to be generally priced below that to be competitive. But no, these are not deed restricted to any particular rent or income level, with the exception again of the ADU affordable program that will. And that's been, that has been a goal of of the city, is how do we get some of these ADUs to be affordable for the long term? And the city has looked at financing them, and the state has got some programs and really have not found a way. And so we're trying to say, can we offer, by offering just you to build additional market rate ADUs, will that be enough to offset some affordable ADUs? And I should say the affordable ADUs that we've designed in the program are actually it could be for lower or moderate income Angelenos. Many of our affordability programs are just targeted actually towards the lowest incomes, and there's many good reasons for that. But this program is actually targeting a broader swath of Angelenos, because we know most Angelenos have housing affordability issues, including moderate income folks, and need affordable housing as well. And so we are trying to get some deed restrictions through that program.
Thanks, Matt. Michelle, are these programs that we've been discussing today available in the coastal zone?
It's a good question. Matt, are there restrictions in terms? I know that we've talked about limitations in environmentally sensitive areas. Are there limitations in the coastal zone?
No, there sometimes are in state laws, particularly the state laws that go bigger and bolder than these often do have particular limitations in coastal areas. But I think each of these three laws do not. They do. They often, for folks who aren't aware, ADUs actually just went through a pretty significant change through some legislation last year in the coastal zones, where the city is no longer reviewing ADUs. They're going straight to the Coastal Commission. Before, it was sometimes a two-step. You come here and then you go to the Coastal Commission. So that change has been made. And they're looking at things like coastal access and often parking issues and things like that. But they're generally allowed, but they generally also don't necessarily supersede or take away the power of the coastal zone. And the Coastal Commission in Los Angeles is quite powerful. And so you what we say is, sort of reconcile two different state laws, right? State law wants housing, state law wants to protect coastal resources. And that's the balance that these projects are trying to hit when they're going through the review process.
Perfect. We have another question here about how ADUs have helped expand housing options, but how much can they realistically contribute to addressing the city's missing middle housing needs? Is the city considering additional reforms such as allowing a 6 to 8 unit building or a single stair multifamily development to support more family-sized housing, increase density, and reduce housing cost? Matt?
Yeah. As some folks may know, this is one of many housing tools and programs and ordinances the city's working on. We know housing is one of the most, if not the most important issue we hear from folks about housing affordability, and know there's a lot of work to be done at all scales. So I talked a little bit about some of the sort of more higher scale 5 to 8 story um, uh, laws and ordinances and executive directors and directives and the MIP program. We've talked about ED1, all these. So those are really at that scale. This is kind of that missing middle scale that we've talked about, both in terms of the number of units being between about 2 to 10, or sometimes it could be more with ADUs. Generally 3 stories in height. And many of these again oriented more towards homeownership versus rental. And again, we see we need all of it. We need all of the above, and this is I think a good complement to some of those other programs that are at that scale. You mentioned single stair. That's a really wonky issue, but very important. And actually, just so you know, if you didn't know, we were this close to getting it adopted. We brought it to City Council, and City Council did not eventually adopt that, and I think we've actually missed a deadline. So that was unfortunate. We were very close. We know the importance of that. Now we're looking to the state, and the state may be taking some action, and I think they are going to be allowed 4 stories through the international code changes in a couple of years as well. But no, this is one part of the program, and really meant to kind of round out and address maybe some areas that have been even a little bit missing in some of our prior work. Which hasn't focused as much on homeownership or this kind of lower scale. So fair points. Thank you.
Matt, under the bonus ADU program, can additional bonus ADUs be approved beyond that 8 unit limit? This question gives an example that if 3 affordable ADUs are provided and qualify for 6 bonus ADUs, would the property be allowed a total of 16 ADUs, i.e. 8 standard ADUs plus 8 bonus ADUs? Or is there a different calculation applied for the bonus?
Yeah, great point. I don't think we touched on this, and we should have that. The affordable ADU bonus program, is seen as an alternative to using those state ADU options that already exist, not stacked on top of each other. So yeah, you kind of you either choose to come into that or you choose the other. But at this moment, they're not meant to be stacked on top of each other. They're meant as an alternative. That said, some of the other ADU bonuses that we went over can be and are in addition to others. But I think you were referencing the affordable ADU one. That one in particular right now is written to not be stackable. But if you think it should be, let us know. And if you don't think it should be, let us know. Thank you.
Perfect. I am going to give you a little bit of a break, Matt, and field this to Michelle. Michelle, for small lot or similar subdivision projects, would the city allow a shared subterranean garage serving multiple parcels through a reciprocal or shared parking easement below those lots?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's what we're envisioning, some sort of like shared easement, or maybe it's a kind of airspace. We don't know the exact mechanism. That's something we would like to hear. I think we have some land use consultants here. We'll need to do a little bit more digging to identify the exact tool to be able to allow that to happen, but that is what we are envisioning. And in general, with if I didn't emphasize this design piece in the presentation, we're really wanting to create greater flexibility in general with the placement of parking. So if a project benefits from combining all of the parking into a single section of, the pre-subdivision lot, like, you have like an area that is strictly for parking, and then the rest of the area is for pedestrian circulation and other things. We would encourage that. We're encouraging shared driveways. We're encouraging shared parking areas to the extent we can.
Perfect. Michelle, another question. Is the city considering adopting more advanced planning and permitting software to better resource, implement, manage, and monitor the increasing complexity of housing policy and development programs?
That may be above my pay grade. We certainly hope so. One tool that Matt briefly touched on in the presentation, it's not a permitting tool, but something we're really excited about. We're working with our consultants on this project, including City Lab and a firm called Middle, to create a 3D visualization tool that will allow property owners and developers to kind of model what can be built on their property. It doesn't exist today. There are some kind of ADU tools out there, but this would be more advanced, and it would be for ADUs, SB9, and small lot development. So I think like that will help save time and money for a lot of folks who can't afford to wait or hire an architect immediately, to just know what's even feasible on a lot. And on the development side, I know that the mayor's office is very interested in looking at all the tools that are available for permit streamlining. It's definitely a challenge in our city with so many departments that touch every building permit. So, it's a work in progress through Build LA and through some other tools.
The mayor did just put out an executive directive 19 asking city departments to actually look exactly at this and actually direct building and safety to do an RFP, to do a bid, to look for a third party who could pilot something like you just said, like kind of a pre-planned check before you have to pay an architect big money and go submit plans and face the wrath of the city. That you can have someone sort of preview or pre-look at your plans to see, are they going to pass muster, or how are they? It won't probably not going to take the place of a full-on plan check, and until the technology is there and perfected. But it is, I think it's an interesting a pilot approach that is being looked at right now. I think that document's going out soon, and we're all excited to see what comes back and how we're able to make use of that. For ADUs, I think it could be really impactful, because I think ADUs are complex. There's many different types, and just scratch the surface today, and sometimes you don't even know what the rules are and what the allowances. We have a 25-page memo explaining it. If we can have a simpler tool, so that's the idea for the web tool that Michelle mentioned, and that could also be really powerful sort of through the tool that you're mentioning. So appreciate those.
This is a question around ownership and tenancy in common. Matt, are TIC projects included or addressed in the proposed ordinance, and how are they treated compared to condominium projects given their different approval process and tenant protections?
Yeah, tenancy in common, TICs. Not something we've seen a whole lot of in LA. It really was a Bay Area, but it's starting to come down here. And I should say that the state ADU law actually does allow you to sell an ADU as a TIC, but only if you're a qualified nonprofit selling to a qualified low-income home buyer. And I don't know that we've seen any of those in the city as of yet. So it's a pretty limited window to be able to sell an ADU as a tenancy in common. Probably maybe some of the concerns that you mentioned. on the one hand, they don't go through the city at all. You just sell, you just do it. You don't have to go through that subdivision condo process. So there's streamlining benefit, but it's also very sort of unregulated. The financials can be a bit hard to get financing for those. And I think it's kind of still an emerging concept. But thanks for bringing that up, because maybe that is useful. Thanks.
Let's see. This was touched upon a little bit regarding the methodology of the bonus options. So, Matt, this is another question around what is the methodology used to determine the ordinance's bonus options and modified standard? To what extent were these provisions shaped by community feedback versus technical analysis or policy objectives?
Yeah. And we should probably, I know we're past 6 o'clock here, and I know folks are logging off to go watch the World Cup game, and so maybe we should just do maybe one or two more here. But yeah, so we tried to strike the right balance of, like, we want people to come through our city door and through our incentive program, right? We think there's rather than just relying on maybe an imperfect state law, we think we can add value here locally, but we need to lure you in. We need to offer you something that brings you into the door, because you don't have to go through our door. You can continue to use the state law. So we tried to strike that right balance, I think, of what would be meaningful, but not sort of blow the doors open, and not, be a significant increase beyond what the state law. So again, I mentioned, like, most of these are sort of modest 20% bonuses and things like that. And I think, again, we want feedback. I think, honestly, there was not a science to that exact number, but it's trying to, again, strike the balance of being meaningful, but also not kind of a radical increase over. But we'd love to hear what you think. If we struck the right balance, if you think it is going to be meaningful enough, or if you think it won't, or if you think we gave away too much or not. But that is, I think that's what we really would love to hear feedback on. Did we hit the right mark there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, this is around Shira. Will Shira, specifically SB 684 and SB 1123 projects, be tracked in a public-facing map, GIS, or open data portal so that the public can see where these developments are being constructed within the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always love to have the data to see, how effective we are with our ordinances. We have been working with DBS to establish, like, a flag for these types of projects, and that's a conversation that's in progress. They seem to be open to that. Many of these will be ministerial, so now they won't come through planning, so it's not necessarily something our department will have control over. And so we've started already that conversation with DBS so that we can also have that information for our own annual housing reporting as well.
Perfect. And let's see, how about, will the city monitor the program's implementation to evaluate whether it is effectively producing missing middle housing and make adjustments or refinements as needed? Matt?
Yeah, I think great follow-up to Michelle's answer there. I think, yes, I think we want to track everything we do and see how it's working, and make refinements as needed. In fact, well, maybe I won't break news here on this web, but some of our major housing programs, I think you're going to see some of that coming. We've been, for example, the CHIP program. Folks may know this is our housing element rezoning program that included the mixed income program and the affordable housing program that we've talked about earlier. Those have been out for about a year, and the department just put out a 1-year CHIP report, and that kind of analyzes exactly what you're suggesting we do for this, and how has it been working, what are the trends we're seeing, and then that is leading to conversations about what's not working and what may be room for improvement. And then so I think you might see you might see some changes coming to that, and I think that's just good practice for our housing programs, and something we endeavor to do whenever we can.
Perfect. So thank you all again for joining us today and for spending the afternoon with us. We really appreciate your time and thoughtful participation. We know these are complex topics, and this is just one step in an ongoing process. We look forward to hearing your questions, your ideas, and feedback as we continue refining the program. And so thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who tuned in, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks everyone so much. This has really been great conversation, and yeah, just the start. We just released this, and so I'm really eager to get your feedback. Please don't be shy on our email. Tell us what you think, and again, we'll likely see an iteration of this version, and we'll have additional opportunities for public webinars and in hearings as we move forward. And yeah, thank you all for being here.
And just want to make one more plug for office hours. If anyone wants to meet with us individually, we're going to be available for several appointment slots in July. So please do reach out. Thanks, everyone.